February 28, 1973, the Indian Parliament is in chaos. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi is tensed, and Finance Minister Yashwantrao Chavan has just delivered India's most controversial budget yet. A budget that is going to plunge India into a burden of deficit. Critics call it reckless and dub it as the black budget. Okay, even today economists argue the impact of this budget. Some say that because of this budget, Indira Gandhi plunged India into this bureaucratic madness we are struggling to come out of even today. While some say that this budget led to much needed agricultural and industrial reforms. How could a budget that was so decisive, so hated at that point of time, actually save India from the crisis that was staring at? Welcome to my series, Stories That Shaped India's Future, 1973 Black Budget. In this video, we'll talk about how in 1973, India was on the brink of a collapse, the characters behind this decision, the 1973 budget, and the impact that this had on the Indian economy. As we continue to debate about the budgets, let's talk about this budget. And here's some fresh ghar ka palak. Okay, to understand the chaos of 1973, let us just rewind back to those years. 1971, India had just won this decisive war against Pakistan. But India did emerge victorious, but it was paying a heavy price for it. Millions of refugees from the Bangladesh Liberation War were pouring into India, and India was paying a heavy price while trying to resettle them in this country. The cost of this war was staggering. Even a defense budget had doubled and crossed over 1,000 crores during the war years. And then comes 1972. India faces one of its worst drought in history. Almost half the country plunges into this dry air. India almost runs out of food. But the big blow was about to come. 1973, OPEC, the oil producing countries, they decide to put an oil embargo. Why? Because they were upset that US supported Israel in the Arab-Israeli war. But this oil embargo has a disastrous impact on India's economy. Because of this embargo, the oil prices rise up by 400%, from $3 a barrel to $12 a barrel. And at that point of time, India was still importing 70% of its oil. Now think about what it would have done to the budget of our country. Oil prices increasing by 400%. And with over 50% of Indians living below the poverty line, India was desperately dependent on import of food grains for self-sustenance. In fact, the story of PL480, the food grain that India was importing from US, and that story when Indira Gandhi hangs up the phone after talking to the US president and she says that I will never beg for food again. That was a reminder of the disaster situation India was in. Something had to be done. India was drowning in debt. People did not have food. The people were furious. The government was running out of options. But who would take the fall for such risky decisions? So, amid this chaos stood two figures, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and her Finance Minister Yashwantrao Chavan. Now, think about this. Indira Gandhi during those days was at the peak of her political career. She had won a decisive elections in 1971 and her slogan was Garibi Hatao. But inflation, unemployment and unrest, everything was being blamed on her leadership and her popularity was quickly fading. And her Finance Minister Yashwantrao Chavan was just on the opposite side of the spectrum in terms of personality. He was born into this poor rural family from Maharashtra and he had seen poverty up close. His approach to this problem was India needed agricultural and industrial reforms. Imagine in 1973 when Yashwantrao Chavan would have walked into Indira Gandhi's room and would have presented his plan. His plan to plunge India into even more debt. Now, I couldn't find any exact account of what would have transpired, but I'm pretty sure that Indira Gandhi would have had her doubts for some time. People would call it reckless, it would definitely be an unpopular budget. But I'm pretty sure the fact that they did go ahead and present this budget, it shows that both of these people had the conviction that probably time will prove them right. But did it? Okay, so February 28, 1973, Yashwantrao Chavan stands up in the parliament to present his budget. The room is tense. The opposition leaders are gearing up to fight this. And it is interesting that if you read the exact speech, he actually starts with the problem that India is facing because of migration from the Bangladesh Liberation War. But here is what Yashwantrao Chavan and Indira Gandhi present in this budget. He spends 56 crores rupees and nationalizes the insurance sector, the coal mines, and the Indian Copper Corporation. Now, why he goes ahead and nationalizes the coal mines, I'll get to it. But after this, he moves on and he spends a huge amount of money to infuse life into public sector entities such as the SAIL, ONGC, BHEL, and he gives them this responsibility of making India self-sufficient in oil, steel, and power. And then he goes on to spend even more. He makes massive investments in the agricultural sector, specifically on irrigation, because he believed that to bring India out of this dependency on imports, there has to be major agricultural reforms. And he specifically focuses on rural development and irrigation projects. Now he goes on to make a lot more expenditures in the budget. And the most shocking fact that he announces that in the 73 budget, he proposes a deficit of 550 crores, the highest that India had ever seen. Now the reaction would have been immediate, right? People would have called it the black day for the economy, calling it the black budget. But was it really a black budget? What was its impact? See, Yashwantrao's budget wasn't about pleasing the critics. It was about laying a groundwork for a self-reliant India. Or that is at least what Indira Gandhi would have hoped to achieve out of it. Now, he focused a lot on irrigation systems. He spent a lot. I'm pretty sure that this expenditure on irrigation systems and this focus went a long way in finally making India self-reliant in terms of food. Would Green Revolution would have been so successful without the extensive irrigation network that India has? I have my doubts. Now, this budget also nationalized the coal mines. Why did it do so? Because India was seeing this outrageous demand for power as India was industrializing. But the coal industry was fragmented during those days. And Indira Gandhi believed that to maintain a stable supply of coal so that the industries do not feel the shortage of coal, this has to come under government's control. Now, the intentions were very noble. But the problem is, because all the coal assets of the country came under a single entity, it led to inefficiencies in the system. Basically, it killed competition. And anyway, India still remains a net importer of coal, right? Which is a huge challenge to our energy security. Now, in this budget, Yashwantrao Chavan and Indira Gandhi also nationalized the insurance sector. Why did it do so? Because Indians were not in a state to spend a huge amount of money on private healthcare or in general even on their health. So they believed that if the government takes over the sector, it would increase the coverage and make it more affordable for the people. But if you think about it, over a longer period, it had the same impact as it had on the coal mines. It led to a lot of bureaucratic inefficiencies. It basically killed the system. And I'm sure that it is this budget that eventually led to economic reforms in this sector in the future. See, the Black Budget of 1973 teaches us that bold leadership is required during times of crisis. And the second most important thing, that criticism is inevitable. The Black Budget became a defining part of Indira Gandhi's legacy as Prime Minister and Yashwantrao Chavan as her Finance Minister. It is still one of the most talked about budgets of India of all times. People still argue what it eventually led to. Did you like this interesting story? If you did, please do like and subscribe to this channel. See you later.